on hold with an insinuation by the defense team that the pool camera, which is allowing us to see what's happening in the courtroom, it's a pool camera that's operated by a consortium of media organizations, news organizations. We are not the ones manning the camera.
Yes, and I want to make that very clear that this was not something that LawNews did. Unfortunately, it was a pool camera where all of the media comes into an agreement, and we use one camera, and then we plug into the feed along with many of the local stations and the national networks, and it appears that the judge in this case has ordered the media out of the room for the day at the very least, and is going to see what he's going to kind of try to determine what happened. The allegation is the jurors' reflections were actually seen and were visible on a monitor. And I will say, while I was watching the Aaron Hernandez trial just from our own feed, I did notice a moment where you could see some people in the reflection, but to me it didn't look like the jurors. It looked like the gallery. It didn't look like they had caught up any of the jurors. Now, why is this so important? If they had caught up, if they did get the jurors, this is a major issue for the case, and it could potentially cause a mistrial.
I mean, I haven't covered a case in Massachusetts, but states oftentimes have court liaisons who work with the press. They set the ground rules going into these cases. They say, okay, you have to follow the judge's instructions. There's no video of the jury. In some states, Wisconsin, for instance, where we both worked, has, or at least one time had a rule that said that you couldn't be recording anything until the judge took his chair. So anything that was happening before, comings and goings, were not to be shown. And in this case, if this camera, and again, it sounds like it wasn't any deliberate act. It's not like the photographer specifically tried to show the jury. It sounds like what happened is there was some kind of a window or a monitor or a reflection that may have somehow caught the light coming in from the jury, and then it was caught in a reflection somehow. You know, the question is,
and again, when I've been watching the trial pretty much all day off and on with you, and I did not see that, but I haven't carefully scrubbed through all the video that we were getting in.
Yeah, every second frame by frame.
Every second frame by frame. And again, this is different than some of the other cases that I've covered where you get the camera operator gets a direct shot of the juror. This looks like it was more of a reflection. So if they did in fact catch a reflection of the juror, of course the judge is going to look at the video and try to determine, okay, can you actually tell who that juror is?
Yeah, is there an actual identification?
Is there enough? Exactly. And I'm hoping, because we're already so far along in this trial, I mean, I can't imagine, you know, jury selection for this trial took a long time, and we're already several days into this trial. It takes a while to get all the witnesses together, that if they have to call a mistrial, this is not something that the prosecution or the judge is going to want to see.
You know, and here's another question, another possibility. I don't know how the specific court rules go in Massachusetts on this case, but do they have alternates in this case? And could they, if one juror was seen, could they plug an alternate in to try to keep the train on the tracks?
Potentially. Maybe, but usually in circumstances that I've seen where a juror member has been identified, if they can prove that it was a blatant identification, I've seen the mistrials. Again, we've been covering a lot of these cases, and I would say 90% of the time, Aaron, what ends up happening is the judge looks into it, finds out the defense is just throwing up his hands, and it turns out, you know, not to be as big of a deal as everyone thinks it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, we can soapbox on this a little bit here, because here's the thing. I mean, when photographers who cover trials are experts, they know what they can and can't show, and I can't believe that.
No, you used to be a news photographer.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that. I think you've done a little bit of it too. We've played every card in the deck as far as journalism goes, and then we went and educated ourselves legally as well. But I mean, when I worked in TV news, when you had a high-profile trial, your best photographer was your in-court photographer. And usually it was agreed upon by multiple stations that the best photographer among all of the stations was the one that operated the pool camera.
Right, because
the smartest one, the one with the most experience, the one that knew almost how to take his camera apart and put it back together again. I mean, they know what they're doing. So, I mean, we need to see what happened here, and it needs a strong look, and it should get a strong look, but I'd be shocked.
I would be shocked that this will cause a mistrial too, but again, if the judge looks over the video and can clearly identify one or more of the jurors in this video, and we're not the only ones streaming this case, so other outlets have been streaming it as well, that means the public potentially could have seen some of the jurors, and that's a problem. So we'll see what happens. It's definitely not a great development. I don't think it means cameras will be kicked out of the courtroom, but you know what, that's happened too. So potentially another remedy for this, the judge could be so fearful that another incident like this could happen, he could order cameras out of the courtroom altogether.
That
could happen.
That's not unprecedented either. I've seen in an extreme case, or a case where a judge thinks a photographer is not being careful, I have seen people admonished by judges before. I've seen new photographers who aren't used to the procedures being admonished by judges before. That's extremely rare. So again, a high-profile case like this, we want to look and see what happened.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you, Aaron. I just got a text from Cathy from Court Chatter, and maybe Anthony, we can try to Skype her in. If you're listening, Cathy, we're going to try to Skype you in because she actually saw what happened. I don't want us to show again what happened by any means, but she actually tells us that the reflection on the camera panned out and showed the jury box with the jurors in it, and she says there is no doubt about it. This is Cathy from Court Chatter, who's also been monitoring this. Let's see if we can get her to call in and see if she can kind of tell us what happened, because again, I must have missed that moment when we saw the jurors, because to me it looked like the gallery.
And I was busy watching the War Machine trial, so I didn't see any of it. But it's, if that happened, that's bad. That's bad.
Really bad.
That's really bad. And if it's what happened, I'm not going to defend the person, but the context is usually you have really highly trained people covering these cases. So,
hang on.
Oh, I hear Cathy. She's getting herself situated.
Hang on. Not sure.
While she's getting herself situated here, she's going to kind of fill us in on exactly what she saw happen without showing us a still shot, because obviously we don't want in any way to interfere with the legal process if indeed this flash second of the jury was shown on camera. And again, why that's so important is because if these juror members, if the jury is identifiable, then it could cause a mistrial in this case, and that's a huge blow to where we've come so far. And obviously the defense is going to want this to happen. They're the ones that brought it up. So we'll have to wait and see. Cathy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. I'm here with Aaron. Could you fill us in, Cathy, on what happened? Because again, don't show us the picture, but tell us what you saw.
Yeah, so I was watching War Machine and saw the tweets coming in. I didn't see the reflection part. So then I flipped over to the feed, and unfortunately, so the talk was there was a reflection of the jurors when they were showing photos, okay? And what I'm hearing from some other watchers were they thought they had also saw a reflection and they weren't sure what they were seeing. And if that's the case, that might not be a big deal. But then I definitely saw jurors. The camera panned out. It was on the witness in the witness box, and the camera panned out, and there's the entire jury box with, I saw at least 9 of the jurors.
So did you see them, Cathy, in the reflection?
No.
Or did you see them in flesh and blood person? You saw the full...
Absolutely, all the jurors. That's when the camera panned out and all the jurors are there. Now, I just saw a reporter tweet out that this is going to be discussed later today about what to do going forward, and that the clerk has been told the Zoom function got stuck. And so that tells me that would have happened in the Zoom out process.
I wonder if there was a problem. A robotic camera here, possibly, that's a remote controlled situation. Did a piece of dust get stuck in the gear? I mean,
it looks to me, just from watching it, that there's and from talking to our guy who's in the field, that there is a physical camera operator. Okay. So honestly, it could have just been an honest mistake on his part, that he zoomed out too quickly and got one of those jurors.
I can't tell you how, you guys know, it makes me crazy, because I have seen this happen multiple times in cases around the country where I really hate to get on their cases, because we're so grateful to have cameras in the courtroom and to be able to see this, but where it just gets blown. It gets blown by a camera operator, a jury member gets shown, and then the judge just throws them out, and we don't get to see the rest of the trial.
And again, that could happen here. We have to determine. Beth Karras, who's one of our commentators, legal analysts, experts, has covered hundreds of cases like this from around the country. She just sent me in a G-chat saying the judge could move the position of the camera so that the jury is avoided. Cameras could get booted, though I doubt it's a mistrial. That's her assessment. And again, Beth Karras is a longtime court reporter, attorney herself, who has covered many of these cases. Again, likelihood of a mistrial may be low, likelihood of cameras getting booted perhaps a little higher, given the situation. What do you think, Cathy?
I have not seen. I have seen this, like I said, multiple times, and I have never seen a mistrial declared. But what I have seen it go both ways, where the judge just warns the camera operator and the media and lets them continue to live stream. Mm-hmm. And then I have also seen this throw it out, and there are no more cameras.
And I'll tell you, I think this judge is fairly. He seems by the book, but he doesn't seem unreasonable. He doesn't seem like a blowhard that would just all of a sudden say, out, cameras. That's my assessment. Aaron?
He seems very measured.
Yes.
Measured, and I think by the book can sometimes carry with it a tinge of unreasonableness, and he seems very, very reasonable. While you folks have been chatting, reading the Supreme Judicial Court rules on electronic access to the courts in Massachusetts. It's a state where I've not worked and where I'm not licensed, so I don't know the intricate detail. There is a shall permit clause in Rule 1.19, so electronic coverage is available in Massachusetts. But this rule reads similarly to every other one that I've seen. The judge has to weigh a substantial likelihood of harm, can temporarily suspend access. If there is a substantial likelihood of harm, the judge cannot permit frontal or close-up photography of jurors and prospective jurors. There's no recording of the voir dire hearings concerning jurors or prospective jurors, because
right.
There are personal details oftentimes discussed in those. The judge can control positioning of equipment, require advance notice. There's non-exclusive access, meaning the pool camera situation, as we would term it here. Judge can hear objections. I'm trying to see what the penalties are here, and I might have to keep going through it, but this is relatively standard based on what I've seen in other states.
Right. In most states, and while Aaron's studying up on the rules there, as we're getting this in live, we're trying to monitor, as best as we can what's going on, because this is happening now as we speak. Most of the time it's the judge's discretion with cameras. Some states are more flexible and allow cameras more readily. some judges allow cameras more readily, but if something like this happens, I think it is completely in the control of the judge to determine whether or not to continue allow camera access for the trial. If there's no camera access, again, that just matters for us, because then we can't get a look at what's going on. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really affect the trial.
Oh, right, and we'll still have tweets coming out, and we'll still follow the case. But we see this happen. I think that, he stopped it immediately. He's not happy. But I think if it was a malfunction, he could allow the cameras to come back tomorrow. We have seen that. We have seen it start back up again tomorrow, and camera guys put on a real, or gal has put on a real tight leash, and we go on. So.
And I'll embarrassingly admit to you, Cathy, when we first started streaming cases 6-7 months ago, one of our first cases, we accidentally got the communication between a judge and the bailiff when we weren't supposed to, and let's just say the judge called me up personally and was not too pleased about it, but at the end of the day I apologized profusely and said it would never happen again, and she was able to move past it, and the trial went on without a hitch. But these things happen. People are human. Clearly, if it was a mistake by the photographer, the pool photographer, perhaps the judge will go beyond that.
Yeah, and I've seen similar situations to that too. One thing, we're talking about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts here. We're talking about old courtroom facilities. So I've covered cases where you're in a brand new courtroom where the judge actually has the ability to control the audio feed, or sometimes to even put white noise or static up, not only on the courtroom feed that the press pool receives, but also on speakers in the courtroom, so that a juror can't catch a word or two of a sidebar. That's talk about a technologically savvy room that's brand new. When you're going to these old courtrooms that were designed, the courthouse in the county where I grew up was built by the British Crown.
Right.
And it's still the active courthouse, and it's more than 200 years old. That room was not built for television coverage, and you have microphones picking up things that they shouldn't sometimes.
And Aaron, just to interrupt you, just in case you're just joining us here on the LawNews Network, people might not know what's going on. We're in a break right now from the War Machine trial. They're in the middle of testimony. They went off for a brief break, and we were streaming Aaron Hernandez, but there was an incident where Jose Baez, the defense attorney for Aaron Hernandez, got word that a camera potentially got several jurors' faces and full shots of those jurors, and so he's kicked out the cameras for the day, and we don't know at this time if this means there could be a potential for a mistrial or they're going to kick out cameras altogether. And just to be clear, this is a pool situation. LawNews was not necessarily involved with the pool photographer, but we're not operating the photographer, but we were part of the pool situation. And the operator has apparently said that it was a glitch, it was a malfunction with his Zoom, and that's why this occurred. But it could have potential serious consequences for the trial.
Just looking to see if there's any other update. But
and Cathy, you saw it yourself, and again, you did see the faces pretty clearly.
Okay, so not full on faces. So if there's any light at the end of the tunnel for that's getting the cameras back in, it's a profile shot.
Okay.
Because the jury box is to the, how do I angle this? But anyway, the camera's front on, facing the witness box, and the jury's off to the side. So when he panned out, we saw the profiles of the jurors, and they were all looking at the witness. So we didn't really see the front of their faces.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean,
I'd have to look at the screenshot again that I took of it. I took the screenshot real quick just so I could just go back and look at it later. But I don't think you actually saw the front. You definitely saw all of them. but maybe you can't really see.
Maybe you can't make out the faces, which would actually really matter. If you can't make out the faces, then they're fine.
Yeah, I mean,
I
the
actually
question...
can't pull it up right here on my other screen. It won't pull up for you guys.
The question that I had was, from your perspective, if this was your next door neighbor or a member of your family, would you be able to point on the screen and say, that's the person I know, or would you not even be able to pick the person out?
Okay, so let me just tell you what I'm looking at here. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the top of the head of a 10th juror. They are all...
So you can see all 9 of the jurors in the picture?
I can see 9 of them. They're all looking at the witness, so I really can see the back of all their heads, except one who's looking down taking notes, and I can see the profile of his face. I don't know that I know any of them, even if they were my neighbor, to tell you the truth. I can't. I could tell you one's a guy that's an older gentleman with gray hair, one's a lady with a ponytail. You know what I mean?
Don't identify them any further.
Let's not go. Let's not push. So,
Well, I mean, they would have been identified like that if they were taking jury selection.
Right.
I mean, I'm not kidding.
No, I'm kidding with you.
We're on a razor's edge.
I mean, his name is Bob. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You can't really. It's the back of their heads.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to matter because if you can't identify them, Cathy, I think that we'll probably be okay. So this will be a small glitch. So,
although I took a screenshot as the video was rolling, and it was probably 5 seconds. So maybe heads turn because mine's now a still shot.
Sure.
So, but anyway, they're paying attention to the witness, so their heads are completely turned away from the camera.
Okay, and that matters.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens, Cathy. As always, thank you so much for giving us your minute-to-minute know-how of what's going on in the court. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
We'll call you up soon. Thanks again.
All right.
Well, that's bad news.
Yeah, no, definitely not good. But again, if it's just what Cathy was describing, where we're just seeing blurs of jurors, I think we'll be okay for this one.
Let's hope. I mean, it depends on how measured the judge wants to be. It depends on how careful the judge wants to be. It depends on how wide angle the shot was. It depends on so many other factors that we're not here looking at it, but I would not want to be on the receiving end of the criticism.
I feel bad for the photographer. I do.
I do, and again, I usually will defend the role of the press. I believe in it. I do not defend the role of the press when the press makes a mistake. And again, if it's something where a Zoom got stuck on a camera, I mean, we've worked for TV stations. We know sometimes this equipment's old. It gets used day in and day out.
Sure.
Hours a day, sometimes 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The equipment always fails at the moment you need it the most.
Right.
That's the way TV news really goes. And hopefully you just have enough pieces of the puzzle together to make it work and compensate for the piece of equipment that fails. But that's the way it goes. So we'll be standing by, waiting to hear what's going to happen next in the Hernandez case.